Good day, my esteemed students. You are welcome to the second series of the webinar titled Essential Tips for Writing Undergraduate Research Projects, organized by Education Student Association of Nigeria, ESSAN, at the Hikman University chapter. In this series, we are going to be looking at mastering data collection, analysis, and interpretation. Some of you know me. I am Yusuf Olayinka Shogbuesan. I am a lecturer in the Department of Arts and Social Sciences Education, Faculty of Education, Al-Hikman University, Ilorin, Nigeria. I teach test and measurement, educational assessment, and related courses. So this evening, we are going to be looking at introduction. Specifically, we will look at essential tips on data collection, essential tips on data analysis, essential tips on interpreting results. Then we'll give a conclusion or a brief summary. Before now, in the last series, you have been introduced to processes of research, research background, statement of problem, research objective, research methodology. But tonight, we are going to be looking at the component that has to do with methodology. One of the essential components of methodology as it relates to data collection, data analysis, and data interpretation. But before I proceed, let me ask as a form of introduction, undergraduate research project is a prerequisite for graduation, true or false? If you are to give me a reply, you will say true, basically because you always write impartial fulfillment of the award of a degree in education and so on and so forth when you complete your project. Just like every other course while in school that you must pass, project is very essential as it marks the end of the beginning of another journey in your career. So if it is true that is a prerequisite for graduation, just like you don't have to also fail any other course so that you can graduate, it is also important for you as undergraduate student to harness every opportunity available to get the best out of your undergraduate research project, especially now that you just want to start writing it. The undergraduate research allows you to explore topics that interest you. It also helps you develop critical thinking skills. It helps you gain hands-on experience in your research field. However, when you are working with your supervisor, it also provides you the opportunity to work closely with your academic supervisor as well as build a relationship within your academic journey. Just like you also know that all your lecturers are important. When you are done with school and you need reference letters or you need academic referees, the first point of contact should be your supervisor. So undergraduate research project will allow you to develop that close relationship with your supervisor and others in the academic community. When you also participate in writing undergraduate research, like you want to start doing, it will help you gain valuable skills that will set you apart from your peers and prepare you for the future. That's why I said earlier that undergraduate project is a prerequisite as it marks the beginning, the end of another beginning in your academic journey or in your career. Those skills that you will get from undergraduate research project writing that you will be exposed to will only not be useful after graduation alone, but will help you navigate especially if you want to further your career in the academics. But before data collection, there are certain things that must have been put in place before data collection. Data collection presume that you have a good research topic that is researchable, and your purpose of study or research objective, as the case may be, are such that are smart. When I say smart, it means that they are specific, they are measurable, they are achievable, they are realistic and time bound, and they are in line with your research topic. More importantly, before data collection, it implies that you have research question or research questions if there are more than one, or you have research hypothesis or hypothesis, as the case may be. It is important to note that you can either have research question or hypothesis, or both, depending on the purpose of your study, as research question or hypothesis will emanate from the purpose of study. More importantly, before data collection, it implies that you have a research instrument already, and that is what will allow you to go forward, to go and collect data that you want to use for what? For providing evidence, so that you can use it to either answer your research question or provide data that will be used to test your research hypothesis. When all this is done, research instrument, let us commence from research instrumentation. When you say a research instrument is a tool that is used to collect, measure and analyze data that is related to your research interest. It can be a researcher developed instrument, an adopted instrument, or an adapted instrument. Let me explain. It can either be that you, as the researcher, you are the one that came up with that instrument with the supervision of your supervisor, under the supervision of your supervisor or rather, and it is found to be okay and suitable for use to collect data, or you adopt from previously used research instruments to suit your own study, or you adapt specifically or adopt it as it is. When you adapt, it means that you are trying to make it suit your own research, but when you adopt, you are using it as it is without changing anything. This can be in form of questionnaire, which is common in social sciences and education. It can be inventories, psychological skills, pro forma, educational tests, among others. One of the characteristics of a good instrument is that it must be valid, reliable, usable, practicable, economical and ethical. More importantly, validity is important. If your test, your questionnaire, your scale is not valid, it means that you cannot be using a scale that is supposed to measure A, you cannot be using it to be measuring B. You have to ensure that you have content, construct, validity, evidence, or probably it has been established, that is why you are what? You are deciding to adopt it or adapt it to suit your study. More importantly, you also establish validity or reliability, which is the consis ten cy at which your instrument is measuring what it's supposed to measure consis ten tly. So when I say usable, usability is also an important characteristic of your instrumentation. It should be such a way that you will be able to use it to collect your data given the condition or situation around you or in your research area. And practicable, you cannot access some data, so you have to look at approaches or instruments that will allow you to harvest those data or get those data easily. So practically, there are some information that you will use one instrument and the other instrument will not be usable or practicable, and economical given the resources at hand. as well as ethical. You have to provide ethical consideration as a guide in the instrumentation process. When all these are done, then you can now go into data collection, which is why we are here today. What are the essential tips that you need to have? Just like the topic has already said that we are only talking about essential tips. However, if those essential tips are taken care of, they will serve as a good foundation or fundamental basis for you to explore and do good data collection. So let me outline some of those tips and provide brief explanation. When you are collecting data, why is data collection necessary in the first instance? A careful and accurate data collection is essential for any research project. Take note of that. This is because without a reliable data, the conclusion that is drawn from any research will either be flawed, invalid or inaccurate. So you need evidence, especially when you are it's not even especially when you call something research, it's evidence back. And the moment you call it empirical research, that means you need accurate data, reliable data, so that you can have a conclusion that is drawn from evidence backed, not just cooked. So to collect accurate data, it is important that you pay attention to details. I have explained what you are supposed to do before you go to data collection. If you have failed to do those things, you have already planned to fail, as you cannot collect any data without good instruments. So essentially, you have to take care of instrumentation and ensure that your instrument is such that it is developed in line with your research question, and it will allow you to achieve your objective. Similarly, it will also help you get data that you will use to test your hypothesis. If those things are taken care of, then you have to ensure that you obtain informed consent from participants, as well as ensure that you ensure you protect their privacy by assuring them confidentiality. Now, what do we call informed consent? You just don't get to somebody and say, take this questionnaire for example, let me fill. You inform the person about what you are trying to do, let the person be aware. Then if the person is willingly making him or herself available, so when we say you want to use them for research, no, you involve them for research. So in their involvement, and when you are involving somebody, that person must also be willingly ready to provide information. Then you let them know that information that you are obtaining will not be used against them, and will also be used to provide information that will be used for them without disclosing their identity. That is essential. So you do that. That's a tip that you have to take note of. Additionally, as researchers, you should also take steps to minimize bias and ensure that the data is representative of the population being studied. So one of the essential tips is that you don't just go to the corner of your room, call your friends, give it to them, then you come back and think you have collected data. You will follow in line with the prescription in your sample and sampling technique, and ensure that it is a representation of the population that you are studying, so that you will be able to provide generalizable results from your data analysis when we get there anyway. So apart from that, you have to look at the following approaches or methods that you can use to collect data. As an undergraduate researcher, you can either use survey, which include questionnaire and related when you say questionnaire, it contains statements or questions that is asked in line with what you are trying to measure. You can also use interview, where you either do one-on-one interview, you do group discussion, you record your interview, whether structured, semi-structured, then you will transcribe it and you use the information that you get from there thematically or conceptually to provide evidence that will be used to answer your research question and hypothesis. Similarly, you can also use observation, where you go to the field, you observe your respondent in line with your interest, then you come back and report your observation. In collecting your data, if you are somebody that wants to work in the lab, you can do experimentation and add A, B to determine cause and effect analysis. You can also use anecdotal records, where you will get facts, secondary data that has already exist, and you will use it to predict or answer what is happening now. Historical researchers will go into the archive. People that are dealing with data and want to study trend, let's say for example fiscal policy of a country, can go into last 10 years fiscal and monetary policy report of the central bank and use that as a data to provide information and policy decision that will guide future fiscal and monetary policy. You can also use educational test to ascertain or elicit information about the ex ten t to which a characteristics exist. When I say test, it's either is educational or psychological. So when we say educational test, this can be achievement test, mastery test, and so on and so forth. And when we say psychological, this can be personality test, interest test, in fact to the point of lie inventory, to the point of you are trying to see self study habit inventory or skills. All these are psychological skills that can be used to obtain the ex ten t to which an individual possess. So when I say the ex ten t, so anybody that is giving a true response to that will indicate the scale or the test will give an indication of how of ten that person possess that characteristics that you are trying to measure using that kind of test. So all these are approaches that you can use. But remember that tip that I said earlier, very essential. Let me recall that you have to ensure that you are giving them informed consent, protecting their privacy, and ensuring that you are collecting data without bias, and you are trying to ensure that that data is representative of the population being studied using any of this method. So this will allow you to either explore quantitative data or qualitative data depending on the kind of research that you are conducting, or sometimes you use mixed method where you can use both the one that is quantitative and qualitative in nature. When you have gotten your data, one important thing is that before you go to data analysis, before I specifically explain essential tips on data analysis, it is important for us to note that sometimes we can have missing data where there will be incomplete response, or sometimes you can have a situation whereby you have already projected that you want to collect 500 sample from your sample size and you are unable to get to 500. So far you are closer to it. It's important for you to note that it is wrong of you to go and manipulate. It is better you report so far you have taken effort to be closer to it. That will reduce the bias that you want to introduce as a researcher. So but when you have missing data before data analysis, so when we get to essential tips for data analysis, before data analysis you have to clean your data in a way that your missing data, if it's going to be essential and important, will be taken care of, if otherwise will be removed and eliminated so that it will not contaminate your data analysis. So data analysis is a crucial step in any research project. It allow researchers to draw meaningful conclusions from their data. There are two main methods of data analysis. Either it is the quantitative or statistical data analysis or qualitative analysis, as the case may be. As undergraduates, you are used to quantitative data analysis. At least you know of descriptive statistics and inferential statistics as introduced to you in your research method courses. So quantitative analysis involves using statistics or mathematical formulas and software to describe, visualize, identify pattern, establish trends, differences, relationship, cause and effect analysis in a particular data. This method is particularly useful for large data sets and can provide precise measurements of the strength of relationship, the health of effects, the cause and effect analysis, the difference that exists between and among variable, etc. But when you look at qualitative analysis on the other hand, qualitative analysis on the other hand involves interpreting data through subjective analysis of language, image and other non-numeric sources. This method is often used when you are studying complex social phenomena, or when the data is too subjective to be measured quantitatively, or you are trying to triangulate, find additional evidence to back up your quantitative data. More specifically, there are various approach for quantitative data analysis, just like you are used to descriptive and inferential statistics. Descriptive mean median mode, standard deviation, all dis can be used to describe your data. You can also visualize your data by representing dem on bar chart, pie chart, histogram as the case may be. You can den use inferential statistics when you are establishing differences, dat is t-test for two variable. When you are establishing differences for three, when you have three categories, you use analysis of variance. When you are trying to establish measure of association for categorical data, you use chi-square. When you are trying to establish relationship for just two variables, you use Pearson product movement correlation if it's a parametric data. You use Spearman rank, which is a non-parametric statistics, to establish relationship. When you are trying to look at predictive effect, you use regression. If it's just two data, you use simple regression. If it is more than two, you use multiple regression. Although there are many other regression, but basically you can either use simple or multiple regression. But depending on the nature of your data, you can go and use logistic regression and so on and so forth. But basically, because you are undergraduate, you go by the simple way or simple inferential statistics that will avail you to provide direct information, not complex, because you are just starting your academic journey. But for qualitative data analysis, just like I have said, they are used to explain subjective analysis. So it's either you are doing content analysis, you are doing thematic analysis, you are doing discourse analysis, you are trying to do graduate theory analysis, phenomenological studies and so on and so forth. So for quantitative analysis, SPSS is a package that can be used. We have several statistical packages, to mention but a few. You can use your spreadsheet, which is your Excel, you can use your SPSS, you can use your Stata, eView, among others. In fact, there is a program called R, but because it will also avail you to understand the programming knowledge, so it's better you use the simple ones so far it will analyze your data. But there are many ones that you can use for quantitative data analysis. But for qualitative data analysis, we have two main ones apart from other ones that you can use. We have Atlas TI, we have inVivo. They are qualitative data analysis softwares that can help you do content, discourse, thematic, graded theory and phenomenological analysis as the case may be. All these quantitative or qualitative data analysis, before you choose them, what are those things you have to consider? So choosing the right data analysis techniques. For you to choose the right data analysis techniques so that you can have accurate and meaningful results, you have to consider the following. You have to look at the type of data you have, whether it is quantitative data, that means you are doing quantitative data analysis. If it is qualitative data, it is important that you are doing qualitative data analysis. If it is mixed method, you do the two and you triangulate your results. The research questions that you are trying to answer, if your research question is answerable descriptively, you go by quantitative analysis. If your research question is answerable descriptively or without resolving into statistics, you can go qualitatively. the level of your expertise. If you are a beginner, you use simple data analysis approach. So far it will provide basic results. If you are more than a beginner, you can use advanced statistics that will provide you additional. It's not that it will not provide you basic results, it will also provide you further results. So your level of expertise, then your sample size will also determine the kind of analysis technique that you want to use. If you have a sample size under normal circumstances that is less than 30, you don't use parametric statistics, because it is violating the assumption of normality. So if it is greater than 30 and above, it implies that you have to use parametric statistics if you want to go quantitatively. But for qualitative research, you may have 5, 10 or whatever. Discourse, content, phenomenological graded theory approaches will be useful depending on what you are trying to find out. If you have interviewed people and you want to transcribe their results, from their transcription you are trying to what? Get a phenomenon. So even if it is 5 people you have interviewed, your concern is not about the 5 people, your concern about the phenomenon of what you are getting from those 5 people. Another thing that you have to take into consideration is the level of measurement, just like I have said. So if you are measuring nominally, ordinally, intervally or ratio, your for a nominal measure there are certain statistics that are appropriate. For ordinal measures there are statistics that are appropriate. For interval measure, let me cite an example. If you measure continuously, you can use PPMC if you are trying to find relationship between two variables. But if you are measuring on the interval, if you have categorized and you want to look at relationship between those two variables, because you have categorized those two variables, you cannot use PPMC again. So far those two variables are already in category, you use chi-square to determine their association, and that will give you the chi-square value and the extent to which those they are related or associated with one another. So your level of measurement of the variable that you are measuring, and remember that variable is what you are trying to explore in your research. Then the assumptions underlying different techniques. Before you can do some techniques, before you can use them, you have to fulfill certain assumptions. So if your data set or your data does not fulfill that assumption, they will not be usable. Let me cite an assumption that I usually take note of. For chi-square, no cell should be less than 5. No cell should be less than 5. So when you run chi-square and you have one of the cell, the row or the column having 4, it is going to be an indicator that there is an error in your result, and that confidence that you can use to say this result is valid is reducing. So that's an assumption. So researchers that have seen that will change that data and use other ones so that they will be able to present it to the world and the world will accept it. So there are certain assumptions that guides certain data analysis techniques. Another example is ordinal logistic regression. Ordinal logistic regression. If your data set does not have order implication and you go ahead to use ordinal logistic regression, for example, you are trying to find out whether religion have effect on something and you are saying Islam is 1, Christianity is 2, traditional is 3. What you are telling me now is that traditional that is 3 is better than Christianity that is 2. Christianity that is 2 is better than Islam that is 1, and that does not make any social research common sense. Does not make any sense. So you don't use ordinal logistic in that regard just because the assumption has been violated, and that implies that they are nominal. So because they are nominal and you want to use their nominality to predict, then you use other statistics. Ordinal logistic regression will not be suitable. So in that case, you have to consider the assumptions that guides different techniques that you want to use. Even in qualitative analysis, if you want to do discourse analysis and there is no interaction between people, you cannot do discourse. It's either you do content. If 2 or more persons are not talking about something, you cannot do discourse analysis. And if you are not trying to explore something with respect to ethnographical characteristics of a culture, you don't go and do ethnography. So all those things must be taken into consideration. Some of these things you are hearing for the first time, but these are just tips. So it can be helpful to also consult a statistician, your supervisor or a mentor, so that you can ensure that the most appropriate techniques is used in your research. After you have done analysis, essential tips for data interpretation. Once your data has been analysed, then it is time to interpret, but this involves the following. When you are trying to interpret, you will examine your findings, look at what you find out and tell us what it means. Let me cite an example. When you test for an hypothesis, you will not tell us whether it is significant or not, but it is not about telling us whether it is significant or not that really matters. After you have tell us whether it is significant or not, when you are comparing it to your p value, if your p value is less than 0.05, if it is less than 0.05, it means it is significant. When your p value is software generated p value, unlike table value that you are used in your class, that you are used to in your classroom when you are taught. So in that case, when you examine your finding, you then conclude there is a significant difference, there is a significant relationship, there is a significant effect, and so on and so forth. After you have done that, you draw a conclusion, hence you then conclude. But your conclusion should be such that it's going to be in line with your research question and hypothesis. Don't be saying you want to determine whether a difference exists and you are concluding that there's a relationship that exists. No, ensure that there's an alignment. You also consider the implication of your finding on your research by telling us what it implies. Apart from giving us statistical data to conclude or whatever, you tell us the meaning of that finding. Probably you are trying to say this implies that secondary school students, when they study well, they will perform better. That is just simple implication of your finding. When you say there's a relationship, a positive significant relationship between study habit and academic performance, this implies that secondary school students, when they study well, the more they study, the more they perform, and vice versa. That's simple implication. You are trying to interpret your data. Then you tell us what you have contributed to knowledge as well as practice from your finding. You try to tell us explicitly when you are discussing your findings that, oh, in line with what I have found out, it is encouraged that everybody should study well so that they can perform well, although other variables are attached. You will tell us what you have contributed to knowledge, and you also consider the strength and limitation of your studies. Oh, you are trying to generalize your study, but you tell us the scope of the study and what should be taken into consideration when applying it somewhere. Probably you are conducting a study among prisoners and you find out that in the prison they engage in gay and whatever. You cannot use that finding to affect the whole society. So you have to tell us the limitation that, oh, this may only be applicable to people in correctional services and so on and so forth. So you give a caveat when you are trying to interpret your result. So you also look at potential bias that you may have put into it. So when you are trying to interpret, you consider whether a systematic bias has been introduced from your own end, and you also consider that. Then you tell us any possible alternative explanation for your finding. A researcher once upon a time found out that there is no significant relationship. When trying to give alternative explanation to that, he said although it was not significant, but it was positive, which implies that we cannot confidently say if it is reused somewhere else it will mean the same thing, but we can still say that there's a positive relationship. So you provide alternative explanation to your finding. Apart from the fact that you are explaining what you are seeing, you also explain what you don't see, what we cannot see, that we can infer from your findings. So these are various or basic, just like I have said, these are essential tips. Today is not for data analysis class, today is not for data interpretation class, but it's just for you to have tip on what to do, how to go about it, and when you encounter it, all these tips will at least provide you with basic information that will help you navigate your research journey. So the floor will be open for question and answer after now, where you drop your question and will respond to it appropriately. In conclusion, after which in conclusion, undergraduate research allows you to explore topics that interest you, just like I have said earlier. So you should ensure that you use this opportunity to develop appropriate critical thinking skills and other skills, writing skills, interpreting skills, data collection skills, every skills that will not, it's not for now. It will allow you to navigate your future and gain hands-on experience in your field. So you should endeavour to develop the basic research skills using the opportunity provided by your undergraduate research. Do not manipulate data. Do not manipulate data. Do not manipulate data. This is ethically wrong. This is unethical. So do not also present result without any data. Do not also present result without any data. People might be banking on your findings and your finding will be leading them astray. So it is unethical and it undermines your integrity too. You never knew where you are going, so don't start to destroy your integrity now. Interact well with your supervisor and your colleagues, specifically with your supervisor, as so that you can create a positive relationship with your supervisor now and desire to learn more from your supervisor, and after which now you will sustain that relationship and you will use it in life. Thank you for listening. My name still remains Yusuf Olayinka Sogbesan. I hold a PhD in test and measurement. I lecture in Alikimo University. I teach test and measurement, assessment and related courses. Thank you for listening.